So like with that data center breach where you went through the sewer system,
Mm.
what was that experience like? Because I'm sure the experienced people on the team were probably thinking immediately, one, this never should have been able to happen. Two, we're about to get in a lot of trouble. Three, we're
Yeah.
getting arrested.
Yeah.
It goes through
Yeah.
all of those things. Even though you have the proper documentation and everything else like that, you're still probably getting arrested and you have to
Yeah.
like talk your way out of it to some extent, right? What
Well,
was that like?
I think what's like people fail to realize about red teaming is more often than not, all you have is a piece of paper where you give it to whoever catches you and you say, this is, no, I'm supposed to be here. And they're like, oh, great, you've got letterheads. I do not believe you. Get on your knees. I'm going to, and we've already called the police. And you're like, no, fuck, call the person on the letter, but no one wants to call their boss and be like, there's a piece of paper here, but there's also someone who is, intruded and they also do not smell good. In two cases here, one, we've gone through the sewer and you're a guy who hadn't showered for 3 weeks. So they're just like, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And sometimes they will call and then the person on the other end of the line will be like, I'm on my way. I always prefer when it's someone local. If I'm caught, first of all, as an immigrant, I don't want to be arrested. Definitely don't want to be arrested today. I'd be straight to ICE pretending I've, come from Mauritius. But I'm like, send me back there. But you shouldn't joke about those things. But no, I always want that person to be local. And sometimes they would agree to be in the area too, which I think is quite helpful. And yeah, it's sort of, the job is interesting. The job is fun. That is, to me, the most fun you can have is on the offensive side. You get to think differently. You get to do things that the general population, A, generally can't conceive of, and B, even if they could, generally wouldn't do it, right? The consequences are too steep. All of those hurdles, barriers are removed for us. We get to think up the worst things, the most intricate things, and then we get to execute on them. And there's really mainly no consequences. I think a few years ago, and I can't remember the names, so just generally, there was a team who were breaking into, I think, a government facility. They were caught and they were arrested, and I think they were prosecuted. And the whole industry was like, what the fuck is going on? And I was just getting in, I think, at that point, and I was like, is this a big deal, is it? And they were like, well, yeah, because then we can't do our job sort of thing if this is, do you want arrested? And I'm like, no. But generally speaking, the consequences are also removed. And then you just have to report your findings step by step plus mitigations in a sort of empathetic, but also business centric way. I think that's like one of the best jobs in the world. So yeah, I enjoyed getting into those sewers and crawling through them. And there was like a galley. So for sewers, most sewers, there's sort of galley areas where for people who are going to inspect them or perform maintenance, they can enter and they're usually over 6 feet tall. And it just happened that this data center sort of connected with that, which you want to say it was an oversight, but was it? Because that data center was unbelievably secure. I could have set myself on fire. I don't think the guards would have come to help. Like, they were very well trained. We tried everything. We tried every surface thing that we could. And the sewer thing was like a last ditch effort. We had to go to the city, to the municipality and get blueprints. And we were all like, oh, it's possible. But if it wasn't, I don't think that we would have gotten in. And so that's sort of interesting. It was, again, the more skill you have, the more luck is important. And that was luck. Like, there was no skill involved in the sewer being there. It was just, all right, let's find the manholes or the entry points and see what happens here. We still, even once we figured out how close the galley area was, we still didn't know if we could get there undetected. So it was a really interesting job. I really enjoyed it, even though it wasn't the most cleanliest of jobs. But it was interesting. I did enjoy that. I enjoyed getting in. It's funny when you walk into a room and you can feel there's been an argument or something. We all have that like sensor. And I remember standing in that data center with the team who were following us. They were internal again, and they didn't have anything to do, but they were just following us. And they were like, I just remember looking at them going, oh, this is really bad for them. This is really, really bad for them. And then, okay. Yeah, it was a really interesting job. I'm sort of glad it was my last one because it was a good one to go out on. It gave birth to the company that I run now, obviously. And yeah, it was a success, which is a good note to end your red teaming career on. But yeah. And if I could do more data centers, I probably would, because they're very interesting places.
So did the galley get you just onto the data center grounds, or did it get you like into the data center?
No, got us close enough to the data center. We still had to sort of go through another few barriers, but it was very close. It wasn't within the perimeter, but it was
Hmm.
close enough to the very, very edge of the perimeter that we knew sort of where to go next. And then the job became a little bit harder, but getting into the galley was the sort of celebration, or first step celebration. But yeah. And I don't know, I can't remember if we gave a heads up to the municipality. I'm sure we didn't. I'm sure that we did not.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to be using these. But yeah, it was because, so let's say we had to break into just the galley, and I can't imagine a job where that would be the sort of objective. But if that was the case, then we would have been dressed in totally different attire. Because one of the big things for red teaming and social engineering is what you're wearing. Social engineering especially, you can't turn up in all black for a day job. You better turn up looking like you're in office attire or whatever it is, high vis PPE and a clipboard sometimes. I actually, Oasis, one of my sort of favorite bands, and a lot of nostalgia around them, and they went on tour. And when the tickets first came out, they were going for like $10,000. And I was like, mother. And I looked at my partner, I was like, I'm going to need some high vis TV, a clipboard, and a set of ladders or something, because I'm going in the back of that arena. I'm not going to not go. So yeah, what you're wearing carries some sort of authority. But yeah, we would have been wearing something different if it was just in there, because what if someone was actually maintaining or inspecting the galley, and we go in and we're dressed in hazmat suits? They wouldn't have, would have been like, what are you guys doing here? And I would have had no good answer. I'm like, looking at stuff. So yeah, preparation also. Yeah, preparation, how you're dressed, how you're going to get through all hurdles. I do everything in reverse on those sorts of jobs. So what I'm going to do when I get in there, I start there and then work backwards. I can't do it in like its linear form. Have to start at the end and work backwards and sort of zigzag. If this happens, I'll do that. If that happens, I'll do this. And no plan survives first contact with the enemy, but it's good to have planned. It's good to get your brain into that way of thinking, because you sort of loosen it up. It's like warming up. You loosen it up for anything could happen, and often does. So yeah, security is fun. The actual like logical part of it is still fun. I
Yeah.
think you're not
So
liked, but it's fun.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So you're doing subsea data centers now.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's unique risks with that. Like, how does that even work? Because you'd have to probably run cables all the way down to the bottom of the ocean, wherever the subsea data center is.
Yeah.
And they're probably at risk to some point or some extent of tapping the cables or
Yeah.
whatever it might be.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely sort of vulnerabilities. So we already have a lot of power cables subsea. Basically, like 99% of all traffic over the internet is going through a cable, and most of that is going through subsea cables. Where are you based?
Chicago.
Chicago. Yeah, so ours probably isn't. I'm usually in California, but ours probably isn't. But a lot of traffic goes through subsea cables that are already there. And of course, those need power. Everything offshore assets need power. So there's a lot of power cables. There's also a lot of countries export cable. France exports power through cable to like Denmark. So we tap into those power cables. And then, of course, the fiber optics are already there. So in terms of like the logistics and the operations, it's actually really easy. In terms of the vulnerabilities, we face the exact same ones that the cables themselves face. The good and the bad of it is, like, if it happens, it's a catastrophe. If a bad actor gets to us, that's not good, obviously, but it's a lot harder to do. You need a ship, you need divers or ROVs. It's expensive, far more expensive than on land. To do a red team on an offshore asset is very expensive. Now, of course, if you're a nation state actor, you're going to be well funded, going to be able to do it, but it's a little bit more traceable because, again, you probably need a ship now. Ships have like AIS, they're identifying tags, and they can be followed, but they can be turned off. So you can turn it off So then we're relying on sensors of the cables, sensors in the units themselves that sort of let us know, the unit's being raised and we did not authorize that. Like, what do we do? And then you become reliant on satellite. So it's more finicky in some ways, a lot harder to do for us in some ways, but it's a lot harder to do for an adversary. There's no just bad actor who's out there that's going to be able to do it. It's going to be a nation state. And if it's going to be a nation state, they'll do it on land or they'll do it subsea. They'll find a way to do that. So that in and of itself doesn't matter. We hope that it's a lot more difficult for them to do, but it's not possible. And if it can be done, it will be done. So we just have to find different ways to secure. And again, it's sensors, but it's also when we have 20 units, which roughly is about 40 megawatts of compute at a site, then we have a security vessel, security/maintenance vessel that stays on site. That doesn't mean that there aren't subs that couldn't be detected, but again, if they want to break in and destroy the units, they will be able to do that, but they'll be able to do the same on land. So it's an interesting little dance that we're all in together, geopolitically speaking.
That's a really good point that you bring up that like if your data centers were to get breached, that's like
Yeah.
the least of the problems that would have occurred to enable that sort of attack,
Yeah.
which I didn't even think about it like that. So that makes a lot of sense. To your end customer then, are they I mean it's just probably just connecting over an IP because
Yeah.
you have network access, so
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
just have an IP,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's it. Maintenance is similar also in that we load balance if a rack goes out, then a rack goes out. We'll bring it online someplace else. If an entire unit goes out and it's 2 or 3 megawatts, that's a different story. We might be able to sort of load balance that to some degree, or we might have to switch out the units. That's kind of it. We promise that within a 12-hour window. I guess the only thing that would elongate that would be severe weather, which you get in the North Sea and you get everywhere, but it's slightly different than on land. Because severe weather on land, that window might grow by 3 or 4 hours. For us, it might grow for 8 hours or something like that. We need certain conditions before we can go out on deck. But if we're in a port or a river or a dam, then it's the exact same. We can probably get it done in less time. But further offshore, it's a little bit different.
So, would most of your customers then be like nation states? I mean, maybe not. What would you say makes up most of your customer base?
So military just now, and then we're starting to sort of get back into this commercial adoption curve. We were slow on that for a while. Most of our customers that way, we thought we're going to be the hyperscalers, but actually the hyperscalers don't sort of set trends. They adopt them once they've been figured out. So most of our customers are either SM or we're renting directly out to the market, sort of neo cloud structure. And then we have these sort of really tight partnerships with companies who either know about or heavily involved in the offshore industry already. So they're maybe platform owners, things like that. And what we do with them is we'll co-locate with them, or offshore wind we'll co-locate with, and then we go out together to the market and get generally private tenants just now, but or neo cloud, sort of just renting out to the market. And then now we're starting to see some of those big players who need to care about latency, maybe because they're streaming games or entertainment. Then we're starting to see them pop up now too. But the commercial adoption is coming, but it's not quite there yet. We're not a well-known enough entity. We're starting to get there, but we're still esoteric. But I guess when it really started to change was with I don't know if you would call it the advent of AI, but definitely the advent of commercial AI relative to the public.